Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Criterion Learning Series. My name is Steve Tompkins, Principal Solutions Architect with Criterion /Sage HCM. Today, we're going to be talking about payroll year-end for Canada. So I do want to get into a little bit of housekeeping because we do want to make this disclaimer here. If you do have any questions regarding the taxability of any incomes or deductions, we ask that you please consult your accountant, a tax advisor, or tax consultant. Criterion support cannot provide any tax advice. The following slides contain the latest data as of November 5th. I should probably update that because I did check it today, but November 5th, 2025, and are subject to changes. So please consult with the Canada.ca website just to make sure there's nothing that changes between now and the end of the year. So speaking of changes, let's look at those 2026 deduction limits. As I said, these are the latest that I've seen. I don't think they're going to change, but please, you can scan that QR code. It'll take you right to the Canada.ca website where it has those limits in there. And if they were to change, that's where they're going to be published. But you'll see here for the money purchase registered pension plan, the limit is now $35,390, which is an increase of $1,580 from last year, or 2025, I should say. Registered retirement savings plans have an increase of 1,320 to 33,810 is the new limit for 2026. And then deferred profit sharing plans have an increase as well. The new limit is 17,695, which is an increase of $790. And as I mentioned, that's the source. I put a QR code there that you can scan and go directly to the Canada.ca website. We're not responsible for any typos. I believe I typed them. I triple checked them, but that's the source right there if you want to just make sure everything I have is correct. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and go into my browser here, and we'll talk about how we do these things in the system, how we update deductions, maybe put things in on employees and make those types of changes. So this is almost all going to be here on the back end of the system. The employees will be able to see their tax forms here, and of course their pay history and things like that. But there's nothing you're really going to be doing on the self-service side for employees. So here you'll see I'm in the payroll admin side of the house here, the back office side. I can see all of my employees and things like that. I'm not terribly concerned with them at the moment because I want to first look at where those limit changes would exist in the system here. So I'm going to go to payroll administration, and we're going to go to deductions. Now, I do want to mention that you do not want to change these deductions or really make any changes that might affect something that goes into effect next year until you finish your payrolls for this year. You don't want to accidentally over withhold something or make an adjustment to an employee that might affect 2025. So let's go ahead and do that after your last payroll of 2025 before your first payroll 2026. So you would go into your deductions, and let's say my RRSP here. Of course, there's some things to look at here. Before I get down to the ceilings or the limits, you'll see these system labels right here. If you needed to go into a special T4 box, you can go ahead and put that label here, that system label for the T4 box that you want it to land in. You'll see I've got a whole bunch of them set up. So if you need to add it to a special box or something, you could put that in there. So you'll want to double check those. This is not something that needed to be set up at the beginning of the year. So if you go into your plans today and this doesn't exist and you want to make sure that it's in the right box, you can set it today so that when you go and you generate your forms, it's in the right box. And same thing, if you generate your forms, you realize it's missing, you can come back in, you can put the right label in there, and then you can regenerate your forms as you need to. All right, so I'll go down here. And this is where you could put the limits in for the deduction. So in this situation for the RRSP, I could put in 33,810 as the employee limit. All right. And it's possible that you do have a pooled deduction. Perhaps you have a dollar amount and you have a percentage amount. Just need to put this in the main record, and then the pooled ones that are attached to it will all read that limit. So very simple, just type in 33,810. All right. Or if you're increasing it from last year, of course, you override what was there with a new amount. All right. Very simple. and easy to do. Now, maybe you've had an internal change and your match is changing or things like that. Now would be the time, of course, to change your calculations for your matches and those types of things. But this is where you'd put those limits in on the deductions. Okay. Now there might be other things you need to do. There are new things that are coming in for this year. Maybe you need to add an income code. Maybe there's certified rate changes for your unions. Perhaps you're doing a banking change or those types of things. All of those things might be timed up with the beginning of the year. So you might come in and add a new bank account and put that stuff in there or whatever it is. This is where you do. We're not going to go into all the details of the things that might change that are not necessarily tied to a tax year change. And this stuff could happen in the middle of the year. You might change your banks or change your GL mapping or something like that. But these are where those changes would happen if you need to do that. All right. I will mention, of course, with time off plans, you really shouldn't need to do anything as far as the rollover of any plans that have a year end to them. As long as you have a system task that is accruing, you shouldn't need to do anything. So if you go into your time off plans and maybe you've got a PTO plan that should roll over at the end of the year, if you have a task scheduler to do that, you don't need to worry about doing that yourself. However, if you don't have a task scheduler, you would need to accrue those. So first off, where you can do is go to your task scheduler and make sure you have something in here that does your accruals. So what you'd be looking for would be a system task, and it would be called time off plan accruals. All right. So this would handle your rollover, your carryover, if you have plans that have a carryover. A time off plan is a carryover as of the calendar year. Now, of course, you may have plans that roll over on people's anniversary dates, or maybe there's a fiscal calendar that it's, I don't know, May or something like that. Then obviously we don't need to worry about it at the end of this calendar year. But if you do have a calendar year based plan, you'll want to make sure either you have something out here where you say which plans are you going to do. So maybe sick leave as an example and vacation, I don't know, whatever you got. And those would automatically accrue. If you don't have something like this set up, let's just go over this real quickly. So you might say that you do this on a weekly basis because you pay everybody weekly or monthly or something like that. So let's just say it was weekly, and I'll set a time at 10 a.m. Right. And I do this every Sunday because that's maybe the beginning of my period or something like that. So I might have something like this that does my time offs accruals automatically. So like this, of course, it needs to be active. And this will tell it to roll those two plans every week. And then, of course, it would be the first week in 2026, which I think this would be the third or something like that. I don't remember the exact timing. I don't have a calendar. But, the first Sunday in the year, it would roll over automatically. I wouldn't have to worry about any carryover balances or doing anything manually. The system could do this. And so this would come in here. So you may have other things, like I have a timesheet creation. I have this daily system task, and it's certainly possible you have other things in the task scheduler, but double check, see if you have one for accruals in there. And because I just added it, it hasn't launched yet, but if it's active, it might even tell you the last time it ran. Like this daily system one tells me that it ran, this morning a few hours ago. And this one runs on a weekly basis, and it did it on the 16th. So that's an example of what that could look like in there. So if you do have one of those, great. You don't need to worry about it. But if you don't, maybe you do these manually, which is okay. There's not any problem with doing it manually. But you'll see here, if I select one or more accruing plans, I don't need to worry about my non-accruing ones. Let's say my accruing ones, I would need to hit accrue and accrue to a date that's in the new year for it to roll over. That's, again, if it is ending on the new year, like my plans, as you can see, do that. So as long as I have it after that year end date, it'll accrue. So if I do January 1st, if you look here kind of in the background there, this 12/31 vacation plan would roll over. This one would not. It would have to be the second because the year end is the first. So in my example here, maybe a poor example, but if I did the second or that first Sunday, which is the fourth, it would then do the carryovers that apply to that particular plan. Maybe you allow a carryover, maybe you don't, whatever that situation is. All right, so that would be anything with that time off. Let's talk about benefits and what you might need to do in your benefits, because benefits also have a year end date. And you may have an enrollment that rolls over people's benefits automatically from one plan year to the next. Maybe employees are allowed to go through an enrollment, in which case maybe you're doing it already for 2026, or it's coming up. Of course, if you need help, you can reach out to support and we can guide you through this a little bit. But while we're here, I might have a benefit, let's say this AD&D, that has a year end. So I would want to have if everybody should roll over from one plan year to the next, I should have an open enrollment that allows that rollover to happen. And I also would want to go into my rates, my rates and put in my rates for next year. Assuming they change, I would put those in there. All right, so those are some of the things. Now, another one it would be holiday. So, not new employee groups, but holidays. So you want to create a new holiday calendar for the year because these are year or annual calendars out here. So I would come in, I can clone the one from last year, which makes it easy because it'll copy all 13 of my holidays. If I want to make a brand new one, of course, I could do that and just start with one that's blank. All right, but let's look at the cloning to make it easy for me. When I hit clone, what year am I going to do it? Of course, now I would do 2026. Right? And then, 2026, I'm just going to very quickly change the year. I will leave the word clone there. That's okay. And then I need to go in and change the actual dates because, things move. This is probably not a Friday. So I need to come in and find out when Good Friday is. I don't know next year when it is, but let's just say it was the 27th. I could type it in there for that, and then Victoria Day, Canada Day, et cetera. So I can go through, change whatever holidays need to be changed with the date that you celebrate or you give the employees a holiday. It may not be the actual day. Perhaps you do it on a Friday if the holiday ends on, or is on like a weekend or something like that. But you can go through each one and change those dates as you need to. All right, just making sure you go ahead and do that. Right. If you don't do a holiday, what will happen is if you're using the timesheets, you'll get a message saying that there's not a holiday for 2026, not a holiday plan set up for 2026. So you want to avoid seeing that message, and you possibly already did this. All right. Another thing you'll need to do, because we're talking payroll year end, is you will need to have a payroll schedule for next year configured. So you'll see I have, some in here, but let's just go into my weekly. I of course have one for 2025. And you'll see it covers all my paydays all the way through 2025, including one in 2026, because it's kind of the last pay period of the year, paid on the 1st of January there. But I need to create one for next year. Otherwise, I can't run payroll without this. So I need to create one out there. So what I would do is just click new, tell it how many periods I'm going to create it for. In this case, it's weekly. So I'll do 52, and then I'll hit generate. Right now, I may need to go in, and what if one of these lands on a holiday and I may need to change the date? That's okay. Let's just pretend that this one landed on a holiday. Come in here and select the first or whatever that was to have the right date for that. Right. So good example of how you can do this. And of course, you can come in here ahead of time, put in all of your holidays for next year. If any of these paydays fall on a holiday, you can also override it when you're processing payroll. It's just an extra step that you would have to remember. Now is probably the time to make sure that it's correct. So you don't have to remember and make a correction. And, it could certainly cause problems when you're processing payroll. If you forget to change it, suddenly everything is dated on the wrong day. And that might cause problems, for example, with EFTs going out on the wrong date or something like that. So make sure you put the right dates in here, review the calendar for this year, or I should say for next year. And you can certainly go out, 5, 10 years in the future. If you really wanted to go out there, you can. There's nothing stopping you from creating 2027, 28, 29, et cetera, if you want to do all those. All right. So just a reminder to that one. Let me also mention tax rates before we get into processing here. Now, this is something where you don't need to worry about the rates, but what you might want to do is put in the correct TD1. So we're going to handle the rate changes as they come out, and I don't know them off the top of my head. There's too many tax jurisdictions for me to remember everybody's rate. However, the form, so the 2026 form, and I should have checked beforehand, but if it's already published, we'll have that available for you. Just double check that this says 2026 TD1. So you have the right one for next year with the right numbers that are on the form and stuff like that. So make sure that it is here and has that information there. There's nothing else you need to do as far as updating that is concerned. All right. Now, if you do have a tax where there's an employer rate, that is where you would change it. So just talking about this would be if I had an employer rate that was unique to me, I would type it in. Of course, with federal income tax or withholding tax, there is no employer rate that you pay. All right. Another thing that may or may not change, just to touch the topic, would be workers' comp. Perhaps you have a rate change effective on January 1, just like other things that may change on January 1st, like a time off plan or benefits. you'd want to go in there and put in your new rates for next year. It is something where you can, oops, not timesheet layouts, but you can come in here and let's say this electrician's one, this one has an effective date of 2021, but I can put one in here effective on, 1/1/26 and the new rates and maybe perhaps limits and things like that if I needed to do that. All right, so just an idea of how that all could work for updating things in there. And there may be other things. I'm not going to go into every single thing that could possibly change. You may have certified rate changes. You may have new income codes or new limits that you enforce for things like that. Maybe you're using the minimum wage tables. Those could possibly change. So there's a lot that could change throughout the system. I don't have enough time to go through them all. But if you do need help, let me just mention, because I see our support people on the panel here. If you need help, you can always, of course, read about how to set that up, but also reach out to us if you have questions. So send an email and say, I can't recall where to set up the workers' comp codes or to put in the new TD1 form or whatever. We're happy to help you out with that. Of course, it's a busy time of year because everybody's going through it at the same time. So it might be slightly delayed compared to normal, but I know our team works very efficiently and gets those things answered as quickly as we can. Speaking of answering things, we do have a Q&A and a chat I should have mentioned early on. So if you do have any questions, please post those there. We'll try to get to those answers as quickly as we can. But let's go ahead and look at reporting here. So we're going to focus on the tax reports. Of course, there's many other reports that you may need to run for other things that affect maybe you do something with a union and they ask you for some type of report, or there's a benefits report. I'm not going to touch those here. These are the reports that you should be looking at when you're going to then do your tax, forms. Is you can see right in here. So I'll open up tax filing. For example, if I was going to do my T4, I might want to look at these reports up in here to see what numbers are going to be on those forms. So I can go to, as an example, maybe I want to just look at my totals. All right, so taxable wages totals. I'll run this quickly here. Now this one, depending on the time of year. So right now, if I want 2025, it would have to be current year, but let's say it's January 2nd, previous year. Now I could put in a date range using the custom, but let's look at this right here. You may want to do, one of these, perhaps CPP2, that kind of thing. Maybe you need an employee count for whatever reason. Check those boxes off and then, go ahead and run that report. All right, well, that's generating there. I'm actually going to open in another tab just to talk about those other things. So the report might take a little time to go for a whole year versus if I was doing it for one payroll. But that's going to be your totals. If you want to see it broken down, perhaps by tax code and then employee, or by employee and then tax code, you can run these reports. This might be if you're going to compare or look at individual T4s for your employees. You want to go through and look at, here's what this person's taxable wages are, et cetera. You again can go in here and say, let's say for current year, because it's still November, and I want to look at a certain thing. Maybe I want to see this and I can run this. And this is going to show by employee. So I don't know, let's say I have a person's last name is Adam. They're going to be right there at the front. And then all the way to somebody who sent with Z at the end there. And it's going to have their taxes in there. So that's how that'll work here. This is the totals report. I can get it to run. So you'll see there's my gross wages, my subject wages, my taxable wages. And then you'll notice over here, you've probably seen these reports. Your, withheld for employer and employee. And you can, of course, compare this with totals for your T4s. All right, so you'll see those, and of course, the provincial taxes and things like that. So now you may not be in Quebec, so you might have other provinces that have other taxes or whatever the situation would be. This would be the one that shows the totals. I will talk real quick about this taxable wages by tax. This is going to group everything by tax code, and then it's going to show the employees. So it's similar to this one it's running, but this one's going to have, for example, the federal withholding tax and all the employees put together, and then it's going to go to the next one and all the employees. So that's what the taxable wages by tax is grouped by tax code first, and then employees are listed underneath it. And let me just again, I'll just do current year here and have that run. So I'm going to let that run. These will take a while again because it is looking at a lot of data in my system, and I'm going to talk about the T4s and how you generate those. So under tax filing, you'll see T4. All right. So when you do this here, now you can Look at it in other formats if you want to just get to the data, drop it out to Excel or XML. Excel would probably be the preferred way, but XML you can also open up with Excel. But you can do that right there. Here would be your CRA business number. Is it going to be the employee form or the employer? Of course, is this the original or perhaps you got an amended one? I'm going to do original because I haven't finished them yet. And then what year? If you want to put the box 82 amount in there, you can. I can run it for just, one employee or something like that, just checking off one or more employees. Or if I leave that blank, it's going to be all. Same thing with a group. If I just want it for, I don't know, my accounting department and I have a group for that, I could do that right there. So depending on how you want to do that, let's just do it for one employee just to kind of make, or let me choose three just to make it easy. You can kind of see what this looks like. See my made up employees in here. Oh, why does it have nothing? These guys, you know what? I might have chosen people who didn't have any pay. So I apologize. I could run it for other people. I think I just picked some guys who didn't have any pay this year. But here you'll see this, report now. This is the uh, the French version of it, as you can see here. So I have that one loaded in here, and you can see that. But it would have the employer's name. So make sure your company name is correct. If it's not, it's okay that you can still fix it. Now, there might be issues. For example, if you had the wrong, account number and you've been filing all year long with the wrong account number, that might be a problem there. But let's say you just happen to notice a misspelling in your company's name that you've missed, all this time and you missed it. Or maybe the address is missing a suite number or something. You can still fix that. You can regenerate the form. So you would go to your employer and perhaps fix the name there or the work location and adjust the address to be correct there. The same thing with like the employee information. If I go in there and I notice that somebody's name is misspelled, maybe they tell me, hey, my SIN is wrong. And, I didn't notice it all year long. And now I see that it's wrong. You can fix it in the system, regenerate the forms and do those types of things in there. So it can be corrected there if somebody tells you, hey, their address is wrong. Now, first off, they could update that in self-service if you allow them. And then once they do that, and if there's any approvals, once the approval is done, you can regenerate the form with their correct information. It does not need to be in there, on December 31st or something for it to be updated. If I'm running this in the middle of January and somebody runs in and says, hey, I moved, I can still fix that. All right, so you'll see, of course, the things in all the different boxes. I'm not going to go over every single one, but you'll have all your things in here for incomes and union dues and EI insurance, earnings, etc. They'll be in here. Now, if you see something or you don't see something in a certain box, of course, that would be something you may need to go to that deduction or that income code and put the T4 code on there, like I showed in the system labels. So if you're expecting something in union dues and you don't see it, or whatever it is, and you're not seeing it there, make sure it says like T4 box 44 as an example, or whatever it is that's missing in there. Make sure that that code is on that system label is on that code. All right, so that's how you would look at these. Now let's talk about where you might go do a change. So I'm just going to jump over. I'm sure you probably know where to change something on an employee, but let's just say Gary here came running in and said, uh, my name's been wrong all year long. I didn't feel like telling you, but it's really Gerard, and I need it fixed. So you could easily change this right here. Or, of course, if you allow them to do it through self-service, they could do that. Same type of thing. Maybe their SIN, for whatever reason, they didn't have it in here all year long, or it was wrong. There, you could change it here, or perhaps the employee is allowed to change that in self-service. So same thing with their address. So come in here, and they're not really on 123 Main Street. It's some completely different address and postal code, etc. Again, they could do that through self-service or mobile and update and go through the approvals, or you could update it here. All right. If the employer information is wrong, let's just go there so you can see that. You shouldn't have any problems with this because you've been processing payroll all year. But let's say, it should say Criterion Inc. or Sage or something like that. You could change that right in here. Of course, you'll see there's a lot of other things you could change, your logo and all the other stuff, but that doesn't go on this on the T4s. But this is where you can fix that in there. It's going to look at your primary work location. So you'd want to go to your work locations and make sure that information is right. So you'll see that one right here. This is my primary, and come in here and put in whatever the right address is. All right, so you can put in that information. So that's how that would be corrected there. And then you go ahead and regenerate the T4s. All right, and publishing them and sending them out to the employees. So I would be able to view them on the screen there, perhaps export it out to Excel or look them on PDF if I want to do that. If you want to publish them to self-service, you do need to make sure you have that turned on, and that is called document delivery. All right, again, this is one of those things where you might, have it pop up and you go, oh, shoot, I forgot to turn that on. Why don't I see that option to generate? You can do that right here. So I already have one configured, as you see, for the T4. But this is what you need to do. This is what it would look like. So the name of it, the report, post in ESS. Now, if you wanted to post in ESS, you do need to make a folder, and I'll show you where that is. But you do need to make a folder. If you want to just email it to the person, maybe you don't worry about sending it or posting in ESS. You don't need a folder for that. But you can say use the personal email address rather than the work one if it's populated. Of course, if it's not, it's going to go back to the primary or work email address. But this will say go to that personal email address first if it's populated, and then go to the other one. So this will allow you to email them out to your employees so they get a copy that way. Of course, you're still welcome to print them, but you could email them here. And then as far as the different folders are concerned, you could create those. I'm trying to remember right off the top of my head. I apologize. It is under my documents here, and I can create folders. Had a little bit of a brain moment there. I can create my folders here. Now, this one has the year in it. You may not want to do that unless you want each year to have go in different folders, but you can make a folder like T4. So you come out here and you can say add folder, call it whatever you like. Maybe you say it's tax documents or just documents or something. And then once you've created that, then you can go back to that delivery and use that one. You have to create the folder first. I should have mentioned that. Okay, so let's talk about, let's see if this report finished. Okay, so this is the taxable wages by employee. And as you can see, here's each employee. And then there's the taxes that apply to them. So that's sorted that way first by employee and then by the tax code. And then the report that's taxes by tax code. This one, as you can see, there's my Canada FWT, and there's each employee and, of course, their wage and stuff like that. So you can obviously compare this to your T4s if you're interested in, comparing your federal wages, et cetera. Now, of course, there are reports that are equivalent of this for deductions and for income. So let's say, picking on union dues again, you can run this one. There's one that's called deductions by employee or deductions by deduction code. And you could say, oh, I just want to look at the union dues and compare what's showing up in that box. All right, so that's an example there. I won't waste our time running that report, but there is a deductions by deduction by employee and by deduction code. Let's go to one last thing here, which is the tax filing. So here I can generate my T4 file for the year. All right, so after you've gone through and you've looked at all those forms, you've made any corrections that you need to do, maybe, like I said, address changes, whatever it is, adding a system label, all those things we've talked about in the last few minutes. And you've done all those, you've now pushed out generated those forms for your employees, distributed them, however that is, printing, publishing to self-service, emailing, et cetera. You're now ready to do it electronically. You can come out here, you choose your business number, put in your box 82 if you need to do that, and then you hit generate. So this will generate a file. This takes a little time. So I'm not going to sit here and hold you up for a while here, but that's how you generate the electronic file for the T4. And you'll also see, just so I can go there in case you're curious, the generate options here. You can do your T4A, T4ANR, and RL1 if you need to do that. They're very similar as far as these are concerned. If I do my T4A, again, I can do my electronic T4ANR. I could do that. So very similar process for each one. Okay, so I do want to respect everybody's time, so I'm going to go ahead and stop there. I know there might be questions, and we do, of course, encourage you to send in those questions to help@criterionhcm.com. But let's go back to my PowerPoint here. And we're going to revisit this in a few weeks here. So perhaps you've got a colleague who couldn't show up, or maybe you're watching a recording of this and you want to see it live. maybe things change. Who knows? The government might publish new amounts, and you want to see if we've updated our slides a little. See if we did that for you. Of course, cover the same stuff. But if you're interested in what people uh, down below are doing here, United States one, you're welcome to join in 2 weeks. You'll get to see the wonderful things they have to deal with. But of course, we're doing the Canada one again here. And then when we get to that one, we're going to talk about what we're doing next year, including, obviously back to HR things, into talent, and on more payroll things. But right now, we're focused on year end and making sure you're able to process that stuff smoothly. All right. So I do appreciate everybody's time, and I want to thank you for joining us today. If you do have any questions, again, please do not hesitate to reach out to us, help@criterionhcm.com. If you're working with a business partner, they also can provide guidance to you. And if they don't know the answer, that we will help them out to make sure that they do get that correct answer. But again, thank you for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful day.